So I just wanted to test it.
Okay.
That's good.
Hello, I'm Julian Ryan, Chair of the Stories in Organization SIG of the National Story Network. Welcome to our February 2020 Story Lab. To people who are not new to us and are joining us for the first time, our group's membership is composed of a diverse and eclectic group of applied storytellers, practitioners who live and work in a variety of industries and organizations all across the globe. The thing that connects all of us is our interest in how we can learn and use the art of storytelling in the workplace. And we're always curious and committed to learning about ways we can enhance our skill set so we can inspire others to use and share their stories. Today, we're going to focus on change management and leadership. Our guest storyteller is Anjali Sharma, the managing director and founder of Narrative, the business of storytelling company, which is based in Singapore. She's going to talk about making change happen with story. So before I formally introduce Anjali, I'm going to just tell you a couple of things. Anjali is an author, a speaker, a business coach, and she has a background in sales, marketing, and business development. I could go on and share a few more facts, but this is the perfect moment to say welcome.
Thank you.
So thank you for joining us and taking the time to meet with us and the rest of our members. When I was preparing for this session, I saw that you've worked internationally and you have such an interesting background and different roles that you've taken on over time. So I had a lot of questions. And I love to hear backstory. So why don't you start off the session with taking a minute or two to share the reason you started your practice and why you started doing this kind of work.
You know, when people used to first ask me about this question, I used to always try and find a perfect answer for this. And I used to try and look for, was this my calling? Was this my purpose? But I've decided the honesty is the best way to go. So I'll be honest about my backstory and what happened there. I think it was around 2012 when I was working as a business director for one of the largest advertising company in the world. I had three things happen around that time, which informed my decision to start off on my own. The very first thing was I had become a mother. And, you know, I had a 2.5-year-old at that time, and I was finding that I was probably spending a bit more time at work than I should, and you know, I sort of that troubled me in many ways. The second one was it's actually a very specific day that I remember. I was on my way to work and I read this article which was titled as "Loss of Faith in Leadership," which was all around Nelson Mandela's style of leadership. And I went to work that day and we were talking about building a campaign for the client. And every time I suggested a new idea, I was told that the brand guide would not allow this, the brand guardian wouldn't allow this. And I remember flipping in that meeting and saying, and who is the brand guardian? Only to learn it's a book that informs what's the best way to deal, what's the best way to apply the brand. And I thought, how can we let a book decide what is the right thing to do for the client? And I think at the lunchtime, when I was thinking about that conversation, which was difficult for me, and that article I had read in the morning, I really, truly felt like I was having loss of faith in leadership. You know, people might have the right reasons to do the way things they wanted to do. I just wasn't finding myself to be the fit. And at that time, I was also reading a book by Seth Godin called Linchpin. And in that book, there's a term that comes up all the time: don't be a cog in the system. So I think those three things, when came together, they forced me to really think, what is it that was my gift? And I actually didn't know what my gift was until, you know, I had a coffee with a client, and the client said to me that, why don't you do organizational storytelling? And I thought, what is that? Like, is that even a profession? And I think that led to curiosity, finding out, and really realizing this is something I intuitively did well, but it was time for me to apply the science, decode, and tell people how I do it.
Great, thank you. So with that good answer and satisfying my curiosity and my insatiable need for a backstory every time I meet somebody, thank you. And we're going to hand it over to you to lead us through your work.
Sure. Thank you so much, Jules. So, I'm given 25 minutes to talk about a topic that I've been working on for a very, very long time. This is probably the only time I wish I was a rookie. I knew one or two things only about change storytelling. I could tell all of those to you and still have some time left. But 25 minutes is also a beautiful constraint. It has made me think much harder about what is it that I can tell you that would add most value and respect the time that you have given me. So what I thought I could do today is to share with you three things, three insights to be specific about change storytelling that I have learned by working in organizations. But the criteria that I have in choosing these three things is I'm yet to come across any organization that does not get this wrong. So everybody gets this wrong. So I thought maybe I will choose these three things in 25 minutes to ensure that you get the best out of this time that you're spending with me. So let's start off by understanding and sharing about an organization. So I want to introduce you to this gentleman. His name is Laurent Philipposi. He's French, clearly. He's the ex-vice president and site head for a company called Infineon here in Singapore. So to kind of give you an understanding, Infineon is a semiconductor chip manufacturing company. In US, you might be familiar with Intel or Micron, exactly the same business. I met Laurent in the year 2016, and when I met him, he told me, here's what we are trying to do. There is a change pressure, and it sounds like this. So we have a factory which has 1,000 people working in it. Over the years, the demand for our product, which is the semiconductor chip, has really taken off. So just look at our own lives, right? The facial recognition, the finger scanning, the chip in our passport, the sensors in our car. All those things are facilitated by a semiconductor chip that is responsible for making those things happen. So over the years, the demand for semiconductor chip has increased rapidly, not just increase. It's not like a progressive increase. It's just a rapid increase. They have a factory which produces these semiconductor chips. Now, how do you meet with this rapid increase in demand? Mostly people will think, let's do this. We either increase the number of people that work in the factory or we increase the size of the factory. Both of those were not an option for Laurent because that increases cost. So the best way for them to be able to meet this rising demand was to convert the factory into a smart factory, which really just means that you have, instead of people, you have robots working on it. The other way to address a smart factory is called a lights down factory, because when a robot works in a factory, you don't really need lights, right? So he was clear that that's what they wanted to do. But his problem was, how am I going to make sure that all these 1,000 people who are working in this factory, who I need the most to be able to successfully implement the change, jump on board and say, yay, we're so excited that you're going to make this factory a smart factory. In fact, if anything, the problem was that people were listening all about smart factory through all the posters and conversations and what media was covering and feeling, gosh, my job's gone because a robot's going to take over my job. So when I met Laurent, I clearly remember we were having coffee sitting in his office, and I asked him, so tell me, are you going to retrench people? And he said, yes, but only if they are not willing to learn the new skills I need. So I said, what are these new skills? He says, well, put simply, I just want people to become supervisors of robots. And if they're willing to learn those new skills, I will not retrench them. I said, have you told people this? He said, oh, the messaging around Smart Factory is all about productivity. So I said to him, okay, so the way you are positioning Smart Factory is to increase productivity. How about we change the purpose for people to become the workforce of future? What that really means is that irrespective of whether you end up staying with Infineon or not, you will be somebody who will know how to work with machines, and you will become the workforce of the future should you jump on and really use Infineon as a platform to learn all the skills that you need to learn. Now, the moment I said that, he said, okay, well, let's do this. What that shifted was when people walked through the corridors of the factory, rather than seeing posters which said smart factory to increase the productivity, they saw smart factory to make you the workforce of the future, which obviously was a huge deal for them. And they started feeling like the smart factory is for them. So the insight here that I have used is you have to play with the human's mind as to how do they perceive the messaging around change story, rather than just giving them what's right. So the point is, you can tell the truth, but you have to tell the truth in the right frame. So most people will only jump on a change if you can give them a messaging that helps them understand what's in it for me that will help me survive and thrive. That is such a basic human need. I am not jumping on any change until it helps me survive or thrive. So one of my key learning has been that leadership does tell the truth with change messaging attached to a story. They just don't tell it in the right frame. So if they change the purpose, then there is a much better chance for them to be able to implement the change successfully. Last month, World Economic Forum honored about 20 factories as lighthouse factories who were driving smart initiatives. Infineon was one of the factory that was actually acknowledged by World Economic Forum to be doing that. The interesting thing for me is that every single factory that is positioned by World Economic Forum as a lighthouse factory talked about quality, speed, and productivity. Nobody spoke about the workforce of the future except for Infineon. So I've got like a few second clip here. You can watch how they position themselves versus how everybody else positions themselves. Takes a few seconds for it to start.
Digitalization has changed all aspects of our lives. The smart factory enables stability and contributes to significant enhancements in quality, productivity, and speed. It also enables the future-ready workforce in Infineon.
So obviously, World Economic Forum's got lots of factories they cover in it, but everybody has the theme of productivity, speed, and quality going, except for Infineon. The point I'm making is that the people you need the most to make the change happen, which is your current workforce, you can't possibly ignore them when you develop the messaging around the change that you want to implement. So my insight number one is, what is the purpose worthwhile? And it certainly can't be a numerical goal, which a lot of organizations miss. I'm yet to come across an organization that gets this right. So insight number one, what's the purpose worthwhile for the change story that we want to tell? Let's talk about the insight number two. So the other thing that I've noticed is that when organizations start talking about the change that they want to introduce, they're very quick to start giving knowledge about the change. For example, in Smart Factory, the way we would do is we would get up and we'll say, we are going to make our factory a smart factory, which will bring productivity and meet the rising demand of our product. And what we are going to do is to have 2 robots, 3 AGV vehicles, new SAP systems. All that information that you're giving as to what you're going to do is knowledge about what the initiatives around the change would be. Now, people don't need the knowledge at this stage because they haven't yet decided that they want to be a part of this change. So you can give as much knowledge as you have, but they're not going to want to come on board and actually be a part of this change. And all that you say is only ignored. What we did in Smart Factory's case was we first created the desire in people to want to have that knowledge. So what we did was we took stories just like the story of suiting, I will tell you now, and started telling people, how does this change affect them? And once they had that information, they wanted more knowledge. So story of Suiting is something like this. Suiting works in the factory. She's been working in the factory for more than 10 years now. When she first joined the factory, her role till today is the same role. What she did was she would take the chips, put them in the rack, and move the trolley from one side of the factory to the other side of the factory. It's labor-intensive role. Now, what's interesting to notice is that over the years, the number of times Suiting moves back and forth has increased immensely. And particularly in the last 4 to 5 years, we've seen a real increase in the number of times she has to move back and forth. So it could sound like when she first started, she had to do these rounds about 8 times, but now she's doing them 32 times. You can't possibly have a human sustain that kind of labor. As a result of that, she's got back issues, she's taking a lot more MC. So the point is, suiting can't possibly sustain the workload that is there in her role right now. So the positioning is, how about we teach suiting the skills she needs to become the supervisor of robots and let robots do this back and forth. And when we position the stories like these, people started to become really excited about the change because they saw that I have an opportunity to become the supervisor of the robot, become the workforce of the future, and all this hack work of moving back and forth, non-value adding work can be done by robots. So the point is that quite often, this is a very well-known change model by Kotter's 8-step change model, that the way we drive change in an organization is we analyze a problem, we find the solution, we tell everybody, let's change. But change doesn't happen like that. People need to see something, that they feel something that gives them the fire to want to change. When we use this science and apply it to the story of suiting, you see a completely different desire for people to want the knowledge. Then they want to know, what programs are you running? What automation are you getting? How many new robots and vehicles you're going to get in? So my insight number 2 is that before you provide the solution and knowledge, you must provide a problem story. Do not underestimate the importance of a problem story in a change story. And quite often I see that leaders tend to just jump on the solution that they want to provide without really creating an understanding of what's the problem the solution is trying to solve and how does that affect the people. I want to shift to insight number 3. And I must say, insight number 3, I learned only after having made a lot of mistakes myself. So when I first started getting involved with the organizations and curating their change story, I used to think my job is to be able to help them curate the change story, equip the people to be able to tell that story, and that's the job. And I'm done when that's done. But sadly, I've learned that change story on its own cannot mobilize change. But change story is a great trigger. What do I mean by that? So imagine this room. This room has 500 people. Laurent has gotten up and is telling the Smart Factory change story. He's finished telling that story in about 12 minutes or so. At the end of that, everybody is feeling so excited and so enthused about what the Smart Factory is going to do for them. Now, if we do not maximize that opportunity of a hire within people and have desks at the back of the room where we say to them, excited, why don't you sign up for the learning program in which we teach you how to become the workforce of the future, you have just wasted a really brilliant opportunity to mobilize change. So you must, after telling the change story, immediately provide a change assistance. Because if you don't, it becomes a great conversation, but does not really lead to a change being mobilized. You also have to, in the same environment, give people a realistic work plan. So change story on its own is only one element. It does not mobilize change. Change story, on the spot change assistance with a very good understanding of a realistic work plan mobilizes change. It's at the back of many mistakes that I have learned the importance of change assistance and realistic work plan. We used to kind of tell the change story and we heard a lot of conversation about it, but then we were like, okay, is conversation the only change we desired, or we really desired change on the ground? And what we realized was that we were not providing change assistance on the spot. And the day we shifted that, we saw a huge amount of change took place. So always ensure that your change story is complemented with a change assistance and a realistic change plan to be able to mobilize change. Okay. So those would be kind of, that's my third insight, that change story must be followed by change assistance and realistic work plan. So primarily those 3 things are the 3 things that I feel people always get wrong. I'm yet to come across an organization that hasn't got that wrong as yet.
Is that what you specialize in regarding this kind of change management, there's so many different categories of that. Like sometimes it's mergers and acquisitions. This is literally change of process and industry at a different level. So do you find you're focusing in one particular niche of change management?
Yeah, so that's a brilliant question, Jules. Thanks for asking that. So when I first got into this, I would do change irrespective. I didn't set out to do change for digital transformation. So this is a digital transformation change. But the fact that I am in a country that has a vision to be a smart nation automatically creates a lot more opportunities in the automation and in the digital transformation space. So the opportunities are a lot more in that space. And as a result of that, I've ended up doing 90% of my work in the digital transformation space. And can we apply the same principles in others? Yes, we can. However, the nuances can only be discovered when you actually do that work.
Why don't you share a story maybe that you use as an example to somebody, because I think part of the story work is modeling it and giving them a sense. Like some of the taglines are quite powerful, but is there a more elaborate example you can do to give us about how you got the leader or leaders in the group to recraft their story and their message, you know, about that? That would be really interesting to hear.
Yeah, so, you know, a project that comes to mind is just the one that I've just finished last week. So, you know, Agilent Technologies is doing exactly the same thing. So they make lab equipment, lab products. So they are on a digital transformation as well. So they're making their warehouse a lot more digitally savvy. So, you know, they will have automation, they will have robotics, they will have Internet of Things and all that sort of stuff. This is particularly the supply chain model. So when I first met the leadership team, they were positioning this as a digital transformation change, right? So they were not even talking it about a story. They were saying, this is our strategy. We're going to get up and tell people, this is what we are doing. And
we cut you off a little bit there at the end to do, when we were so excited about some of the things you were saying, we wanted to capture it. So you're giving 3 points. I think one of the things I'd love to hear about that would be a little bit story on you is lessons learned about how you were communicating and then finding maybe a different way to engage the leader in how he was framing his or her story, you know, to the organization. And it's not just him, it has to go down the line. So can you give a lessons learned from yourself?
Yeah, for sure. So, you know, I think some of the key lessons that I've learned through this process, and I'll kind of try and, you know, limit it to 1 or 2 for you here, is that whenever you meet a leader, he or she is very clear about what they want to do with the change, how they're going to implement it, how they're going to, you know, what are the strategies they have, what's the plan, what's going to happen, how much they're going to invest. But the leaders tend to really sort of stop and fumble for a bit when you ask them, so what broke down as a result of which you're doing this? They don't tend to have answer to that question with as much clarity. And that is a very important thing to notice, because people, you know, if somebody tells me you have to start going to the gym 10 hours a week or something like that, unless I don't feel I need it, I'm not going to go, right? So I think people are more motivated by loss aversion, by actually achieving something. So what the leader is there to lead and make the change happen, right? That's the vision. So he or she is doing the right thing. But what they have to try and understand is that people are not in those roles to be able to drive the same vision that he or she has. So you have to show them how they are also going to benefit from this change, or else it just seems like if you go down on the floor, I'll give you this really funny moment that I went through. So here's a leader who's going through a CRM system change. He gets up on the stage and he says, there's 10,500 people seated that work for him. And he says, we are going to change our CRM system because we're losing market share. We have complex ways of working internally, and we have silos. we work in silos. I'm seated next to a rank and file person who plays an important role within the organization. And I ask the person, do you understand what the CEO says? The rank and file person turns around and says, I understand, but I don't get paid enough to be worrying about market share. So the point I'm making is that as long as we keep our language only attached to the vision and not to the problem we are trying to solve, you're not going to really make the people in the organization, by the way, who you need most to make the change happen, move forward. So that's one of my biggest learning. And the knowledge of the leader about the problem that they're trying to solve is also at a very superficial level, right? What they would say is things like complexity, productivity, quality, speed. These are distilled terms. I don't feel connected to distilled terms. You have to be able to show me where in my work productivity went away, where in my work speed was slow. So I think when I ask the leaders about moments where they can tell me about that I felt is a place where you need to do a lot of work, and you need to be able to get the leader to go, okay, so what's the problem you're trying to solve? What broke down in your world? A lot of them see it as an opportunity. They don't see it as a problem, which is again a problem.
Okay, fair enough. Pete, what about you? Pete? Oh, sorry. I thought he was sticking his head for a question. Sorry.
No, I'm taking notes.
Okay. And then, do you have a particular motto or phrase you use with the leaders to catch their attention besides telling them the story? So how do they, what is some of your process to get them, to enable them to listen to what you are proposing?
Okay.
Is there a motto? Do you show them their competitor doing a really good job of what you just taught them? You know, like, what is your method?
Yeah, so I think what I've learned is that I don't have to tell them, I have to listen to them. So when I meet them first, I just listen to them as to what do they want to do. And sometimes, depending on the personality of the leader, I have to listen more because they're so excited about the change and they're so enthused about it. So I have to listen more. And when I listen, then I have to start putting them in little scenarios, right? Scenarios sound like this. So I'll say, okay, I get what you're trying to do, and I think it's brilliant. I work in your procurement team. You meet me in a corridor and you tell me you're doing this. Why should I be excited about it? So I think what I've learned is that if I put them in these scenarios, then they start going, you should be excited about it because in your, okay, I said, in your messaging, that didn't come through. So we are going to have to build that in you. So I have to keep putting them in these scenarios where they themselves see themselves failing, right? So it's like, let me take you in this scenario where you will see that the person who's listening to you can pretty much just shrug shoulders and walk off and care. And when I can make them feel that, not listen to that alone, then their will to want to hear what I have to say heightens, increases. So I've noticed is listen, put them in scenarios, demonstrate to them they don't have what it takes as yet to be able to mobilize change. And once they've started feeling it, they will go, okay, tell me what do I need to do?
And do you find a person, sometimes when I was internally in human resources, I'd find somebody that I know would be a good beta site to test something on and to share them. So your CEO would have a success in making a conversion or a thought process before you tell them to go talk to everybody. Like, did you have people that you would identify in the organization as somebody you could have them practice on and see if they could win them over and change their, so they could give, from that person, that role to be able to give them some feedback in real time?
Yeah, so that's a really good question as well. What I've learned is that CEO or the leader is less resistant to this style than everybody else because everybody is fearful of that person, right? So my biggest success has come when I have actually given the team who supports the CEO directly or the big leader directly, I've given them the confidence that if you just put me in front of him, I will be able to show you success. So building credibility with that team is way more important than demonstrating to that team. Now, how does credibility building happens with that team? That just, Jules, happens with the name you have in the market. So none of my work comes from somebody thinking, oh, we need a story for this change. It always comes from somebody telling someone else in a cafe, um, we had this change and we got Anjali to help us with it. And then they'll be like, really? What is change storytelling? And then they're like, okay, so what did you do with that company? Then I show them, what did I do with that company? And then what would you do with us? I said, I don't know until I have a conversation with the person who's leading the change. And I think that confidence, when they get that confidence, when they put me in front of their CEO, it gives them a lot of relief, because they know then things have actually kind of, moving forward. And it's sadly in B2B business, which is where a lot of my work is, making yourself look good in front of the CEO is a very big deal. And that this process has very often made people look very good in front of their CEOs for having found the talent that can actually drive the business outcomes. So I have to get to the CEO. I can't talk to the lair, because the lair is always nervous. Oh my God, what if this goes wrong? Again, a quick story about this. So here's a really, one of Singapore's largest telecommunications provider. I won't name them. I have a very senior team working with me. We are doing our first step of change. And I want the leader to be able to, it's a large workforce, more than 10,000 people. I want the leader to be able to, through a story, invite people to come to the session where I will elicit stories from them where things break down, because we really are providing a solution without knowing what things are breaking down. I want the leader to be able to do the video in a story format, not in a give knowledge format. The team tells me he will never do the story way. You have to give it to him in a very structured, to the point, distilled sort of format. To convince the team, I write both styles. And then I say to the team, I need you to give me 5 minutes with the CEO to be able to convince him to do it in the story way. The team says he will not agree to it. But because I'm stubborn, they allow me. I stand in front of the CEO. I only have 5 minutes. The video camera is on. He's wearing his jacket. And I say to him, I'm going to do a quick demonstration for you. You are the employee who's going to get this video. I'm going to do the video in 2 ways for you. You decide which is the way you'd like to represent yourself. I do it in the distilled way. I do it in the story way. He finishes wearing his jacket. He looks in the mirror and he says to me, I'm going the story way. So I think the real desire for success is in that big leader, and you have to be able to get to him. And that's when risk is taken, new things are tried, and amazing things happen.
That's great. That's good. So, and you work strictly with the CEO. So who champions, do you try to filter that story culture into other levels when you're working through, and how does that happen?
Yeah, so once we get the frame right, so there are very specific chapters in a story that I have over the years developed. Like chapter 1 is this, chapter 2 is this, chapter 3 is this. So I've got a very set way of working. And, think of them as Lego pieces, right? You need this, you need this, you need this, you need this for the castle to be ready. And what I've learned is that those pieces don't change no matter who tells, but the flavor of how it is told has to be changed based on everybody, right? Like who tells it. So once I get that frame right and I get the key messages right, I work with the CEO. He does the first delivery, and it's important for me that he delivers first, because then people see him in action and witness the magic. And then he says to me, right, we walked into the room, we managed to do this brilliantly. Everybody signed on the change assistance. It needs to now go down to the R&D team. It needs to now go down to the sales team. It needs to now go cascade down. I will take his second layer. I will take the same structure of the story, same messaging, and I will now work with the key team under the CEO to then start adding their own flavor. What I've learned in this is that you can't take them in a common room. What you have to do is you go individual with them.
That's true.
And if you go individual with them, you're able to elicit so many amazing things from them. And once you elicit those and you frame it all and you give it to them, then they then go and do it for their own function. The other big learning that I've had is you have to, as storytelling professionals, you have to create tangible outcomes for a business. You can't just say, do this way, do that way. Here's the story you told. Come practice the story and you're ready. That's not tangible. You have to get it down into a document or into a something that people can go back and look at it and say, this is what we created. Tangible outcome has been a huge part of our work.
Give me an example of that. I mean, I get a sense of what you're talking about. I always like to get from your perspective.
Yeah, so that could look like a book which has the entire script written, a full story book created with all the chapters, and has got inserted videos we've taken of the CEO's delivery, and we insert the videos in the book as well. And so we create that tangible outcome. And in some cases, when Christmas comes, we actually print those books and give it as gifts. This is your story. So self-relevance is super glue of attention. So when you kind of give people what they've done and what they've created and you package it wonderfully, people love to see that. Because then I'm not relying on the CEO to be able to tell it effectively alone. I'm actually even showing it that can be cascaded. And he then shares it with his team and says, this is how I did it, guys. You might want to look at it.
Fantastic. Thanks. Pete, before we wrap up, do you have any questions?
No, I don't. Great presentation, Anjali. My apologies for not getting this process right.
Oh, Pete, don't even worry about it. You know, I'm more excited about just chatting to you all rather than getting a video done of myself. Really, no big deal.
Oh, boy, thank you.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to just end with a thank you. And also, before everyone signs off, I'm just going to close with a few remarks. So when people are checking in later on, I have a couple more things we can share with them. First of all, question for you. Where can someone reach you if they want to talk to you or share ideas about storytelling? Where can they find you? Where's the best way?
So I kind of have a very strong discipline about showing up. So in LinkedIn, I show up 3 times a week. And when I show up, it's all about story work, and it's not about curation of content, it's the content I create. So every Wednesday, I share an insight on storytelling. A 60-second video comes out. Every Saturday, I share a story of, that business people can use. And every Tuesday, I will share what am I reading and what am I learning from it. So on LinkedIn, I turn up 3 times. If somebody wants a little preview into my personal life, not the food I'm eating and the clothes I'm wearing and the heels I'm wearing, but you know, what's kind of my routines, how do I create so much content, who's in my team, where are we off to? I show up on Instagram 6 times a week. What are my beliefs, you know, my internal sort of thought processes. Instagram is Anjali Stories, at Anjali Stories. LinkedIn, you can find me, Anjali Sharma.
Yeah, thank you for connecting with me today. So I did, before I got on the call, I accepted. So thank you.
My pleasure.
All right, thank you. Okay, so to everybody out there who's listening, one more thing. I hope you enjoyed today's Story Lab and would like to find out more about the National Story Network. So please visit our website at storynet.org and find out more information about our various SIG groups and the upcoming March Story Lab. Another reason to stay connected is you're going to definitely want to learn about what we have planned for the 2020 National Storytelling Network Conference that's being held at the end of July in Atlanta, Georgia. RSIG, the SIO, and HSA, the Health Healing Alliance SIG, are collaborating this year and are holding an all-day pre-conference event with a fantastic presenter. Her name is Cheryl Caulfield, a thought leader in inclusion and leadership. Her session is going to focus on how we can build courageous communities for work and life by developing our authentic leadership skills. So she'll be sharing her insights and tools from her formidable body of work. So all the more reason to get on the mailing list and remember to register. And finally, please reach out to us regarding membership suggestions for podcast guests or topics. So join us and be part of our storytelling culture. And until next time, thank you. Have a great day.